Hello and welcome to IoT World Today. I'm Lauren Horwitz, Senior Content Director at IoT World Today. And I'd like to welcome Paul Welliner, who's Vice Chairman, U.S. Industrial Products at Deloitte. And Paul and I are going to talk about a recent report from Deloitte on the acceleration of smart manufacturing and some factors that you folks have identified in sort of the acceleration of smart manufacturing. So Paul, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, glad to be here, Lauren. Looking forward to the conversation.
I am as well. So first, just to give our readers some context, we'll provide the link to the report as well, but could you give our readers some context in terms of the key findings of the report?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And this was a report that we published about 2 weeks ago. We did it jointly with MAPI, the Manufacturers Alliance on Productivity and Innovation. And it's been the fourth year in a row that we've done studies with MAPI. Last year, we did a study that was focused on the smart factory, and we developed a thesis around 8 major use cases that people who are implementing smart factories begin with. And we also identified a set of people that we called trailblazers. They were organizations that are the leaders in implementing these 8 great use cases that we talked about in the 2019 study. In 2020, we really took the study to another level, and we began to think about what were the key accelerators that those trailblazers in 2019 were utilizing to accelerate their smart factory innovations. And where we landed was this notion of ecosystems, that companies are no longer able to do things by themselves. They have to look to partners, to help accelerate their efforts. And we defined ecosystems not just as a vendor relationship or a supplier relationship, but it's broader than that. And we defined it across, 4 major dimensions. We defined them as things you would normally think about for manufacturers inside the 4 walls of the factory as kind of a manufacturing ecosystem. We then thought about how that extends outside the factory and down the supply chain into a supply chain ecosystem. And those are then connected to ultimately to a set of customer ecosystems, which can be difference in channel partners, the way people use social media, the way things get connected to customer bases differently today, whether they're B2C or B2B. And then finally, we thought about a talent ecosystem, which really anchors all 3 of those other pieces with, the way that organizations are able to attract talent these days. It's not always that they become their employee. It could be someone from the gig economy. It could be someone who is part of a trade organization, part of a university, part of a community college, part of various different things that might be able to provide talent to that organization. So that's how we define those, if you will, those ecosystems that were accelerators for the smart manufacturing companies. We saw increasing numbers of companies embracing the smart manufacturing techniques as well, those 8 great use cases as I talked about earlier. But there's a lot more kind of behind that, and I'm sure we'll get into some of that here, in the next little bit, Lauren.
So, and just to dig into that a little bit more, I believe you made the distinction in the report between sort of ecosystems aren't just external relationships. It's more than that. It's kind of, and by having these ecosystems, manufacturers are really able to kind of be be something greater than the parts. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? What does an ecosystem kind of bring to the equation that just external relationships don't?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it might be more nuanced than just thinking about a supplier relationship, but they start with a supplier relationship. You've got to begin to have a trust with an organization that might be providing you something. It could be components, it could be systems, it could be robotics, it could be automation, it could be material handling, it could be someone who is your provider of your utilities, because you might start to think about a smart ecosystem that might dive into solar power, wind power, other kinds of things that might be the power source behind your facility. So it starts with those relationships, but it extends beyond that. It extends beyond that kind of one-on-one relationship to a relationship that becomes, as I said, broader than the that just kind of one-to-one. It's also got some characteristics that end up being more trust-based. You become comfortable with each other from the standpoint of sharing intellectual property. You become comfortable with each other in terms of the business arrangements. You become comfortable with each other when it comes in terms of things like data protection and cybersecurity. So there's a lot of elements that come to place because you are opening up a much freer dialogue with those ecosystems partners than you might just be with a supplier who has just got a particular relationship with you where you're buying something from them and they're delivering something to you, at a particular point in time, a particular quantity, a particular price. I think the place that it really, kind of is more easily demonstrated is in the talent ecosystem. You can think of, academia as being part of your talent ecosystem. You can think of, gig workers as being part of your talent ecosystem. You can think of, the trade associations that might be connected to, organized labor, or might be connected to different accreditation organizations that can be able to provide talent to you. You can think about technology councils that might be, an input to you that might help from a labor standpoint. You can think about the government, as playing a role, whether it's in training incentives or creating programs that might allow you to continue to grow and develop your talent. Maybe it's in a remote part of the country where you've got to have that, that ecosystem that is a deeper partnership between the organizations.
Now, let me ask you this. This was only touched on in the report in terms of the use of data analytics, but I know in some of my conversations with folks, supply chain managers, folks who are kind of industry watchers of supply chain dynamics over 2020, they've talked a lot about sort of kind of creating ecosystems of data sharing. Is that one of the best practices that's emerging as you look at these ecosystems?
Yeah, I think the sharing of data and data ecosystems are definitely an interesting place. It takes a lot of the things that we saw in our 8 great use cases and brings them together. The ability to enable, 5G, the ability to enable the cloud, not necessarily having all the talent inside the organization to be able to do the analytics that might be necessary as it relates to supply chain or quality or, or other kinds of things that are of interest to manufacturers, and looking to ecosystem partners in the supply chain, in the customer base, inside the 4 walls of manufacturing to do some of that analytics for you. It almost becomes one of the many things that are now being looked at as the quote unquote as a service, right? Quality as a service, analytics as a service, construction as a service. There's lots of, quote unquote as a service capabilities that organizations are looking at to, buy by the drink versus invest in all the capabilities themselves and have it on site and in-house. So I think that is a great example of, where the ecosystem is coming to play in a place like analytics in the supply chain.
Now, the report also talked, kind of the one of the highlights is that 2020 and the advent of COVID-19 has kind of accelerated the need for these smart manufacturing principles and practices to come to fruition. But at the same time, the report indicates that it may take many folks that you've just talked with up to, say 12 months to really implement some of these principles. How do those two assertions kind of square?
Yeah, it's a great question because it's hard to sometimes ferret through the data to see what, people's intentions are. And this year we had over 900 survey respondents from around the world, up from just over 600 last year. And one of the things that we saw in the data was that nearly 4 in 10 companies paused their initiatives. And those are the group of people that thought things were going to be taking longer for, implementations to take place. That, and even saying things that are going to be delayed a year or take up to a year to implement is still an aggressive time frame when you think about some large organizations with many locations across many geographies. It's hard to imagine companies getting fully implemented in what they need to do from a smart and digital standpoint in 12 months, no matter how aggressive they are. But 4 in 10 of the folks that we interviewed were slowing things down. 60% of the respondents were really kind of keeping the same pace that they had pre-COVID. And in that group, we saw, basically a 20% increase in the amount of dollars that they were spending on smart and digital type projects. So in that group that was maintaining, we saw them accelerating expenditures to be able to get some of those benefits more earlier on. So I think that's how you parse the information that we received in the survey to say, yes, some are slowing, but some are also accelerating.
That sort of squares with some of our data. We recently did an IoT adoption survey with about almost 500 respondents. And as I recall, about really almost 2/3 of respondents said that COVID-19 had kind of accelerated their need for digital transformation initiatives
Right.
in the enterprise. At the same time, there was a substantial portion of respondents saying budget has been curtailed and constrained. So that was sort of the nature.
We think it has something to do with generally the end markets people serve, because particularly the bounce back has been so different across different end markets, right? We joked in the spring about, what was going to become the next toilet paper. People, consumer products that were in our homes, or whether it was around cleanliness or whatever, were always out of stock. As we started to get, more open in the summer, we started to see home improvement projects, really taking over people's lives. For those who had the well-being enough to be able to invest in their home, we saw washers and dryers and, outdoor power equipment all becoming very, very constrained. Anything to do with home improvement, very constrained. On the flip side, the oil and gas industry, the commercial aviation industry, those ones have really been hamstrung by the rebound, right? None of us are out on airplanes, like we were just 12 months ago. I'm a person who spent my entire career traveling 100 flights a year, and I haven't flown on an airplane since the end of February. So, the airlines are really struggling, and therefore their supply chains are really struggling. So you could probably, if we went a layer deeper on these, your study and ours, we'd probably find the ones who are accelerating are the ones who are, in the midst of that boom, and the ones who are decelerating are the ones that are constrained because, their markets aren't doing very well.
Mm-hmm. And now finally, let's talk a little bit about one of those smart manufacturing principles that's sort of taken hold, which is Cobots. Let's talk a little bit about what that looks like for some of your respondents, and also maybe some of the repercussions of moving to automation, what that means for human work.
Okay. Well, and as you know, cobots are an evolution or an extension of where things were from a robot standpoint, with a collaborative robot. Robots were put in place because of, trying to get rid of tasks that were dirty, dangerous, dull, or basically dear. Dear being, I've seen people define that as expensive, and dull being almost demeaning type tasks. So, we've been trying to automate those kinds of tasks away to make employment and activity, particularly on the shop floor, more engaging for people. Cobots as a natural extension of how do we continue to leverage, automation in our factories, not as a way to take away jobs, but because of the skills gap that we have in the U.S., 2.4 million jobs being unfilled by 2030, based upon a study that Deloitte did 3 years ago with the National Association of Manufacturers. We got to try to figure out how we fill that skills gap. And that's not going to be just with people. We're going to have to think about all sorts of different dimensions of improving productivity, improving the utilization of things like cobots, trying to figure out ways to supplement work by bringing in new people into the workforce, by supplementing those tasks and looking at underrepresented minorities, looking at veterans, looking at training programs that might be able to accelerate people into the workforce. We've got to come at it from a lot of different dimensions, and cobots is just one of those. So I think it's much more of a supplementing tool than a taking work away tool. But obviously, there's different opinions on that too, depending on where organizations are in their digital transformation life cycle.
And was there a data point in terms of how many organizations had sort of moved to robotics or cobots or some this kind of supplementary workforce?
Well, we didn't ask that question directly because we were focused on our 8 use cases. In our 8 use cases, some of them definitely have cobots or robots as an embedded enabling technology in those use cases. If you think about material handling, it's a place where automation has come into place over the last several years. I mean, it started many years ago with AGVs, but it's become much more of a robotic capability that allows material to flow around a facility without having to put in a dedicated line in the shop floor that allowed material to flow in the past. So it's a place that it's enabled by robotics versus just robotics itself. But as we look at our use cases, we saw these 8 use cases being implemented across the board. Between 60 and 80% of our respondents were embracing one of those 8 use cases, and up to a third of them we saw as pretty mature in working with those 8 use cases. So there's definitely robotics pieces embedded in all of those spaces, but we didn't ask the robotics question specifically.
Got it. Well, Paul, this has been very illuminating. I hope for our listeners as well. We'll be covering industrial IoT and many other areas of connected things all throughout the year next year. So we hope we can have you back to discuss further findings with us.
Look forward to it, Lauren. It was great having a conversation with you, and have a good rest of the day.
Oh, you too. And for our listeners, you can always check out more on IoT World Today. And until next time, I'm Lauren Horowitz.